Today's presentation is a presentation called She Who Wears the Crown. And it is based on the Crown Act and my own personal experience and hair journey as it relates to my hair and what it means to be a professional as a Black woman trying to navigate managing our professional grooming and the standards that have been set for women as it relates to hair. So if you haven't heard, there's something called the Crown Act. I'm not going to go into all the details about the Crown Act, but I do encourage everyone to look up the Crown Act. There is actual legislation in some states that makes it illegal to discriminate in the workplace against primarily women who are mostly affected, and African-American women to discriminate against or to have policies that discriminate against us for wearing our hair in its natural state. However, in most states, it's still illegal. In most states, it's still legal to have practices that discriminate based on natural hair. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I do want to encourage you to look up the Crown Act and legislation that really only came about as of 2019. So it's been a long fought journey for Black women to be able to wear their hair naturally. So this is a little bit about me and my story and my personal narrative. The first picture is a picture of me with my grandmother. I'm born and raised in Oakland, California. That's at a little gas station out in East Oakland. And as you can see, I have a little fro there. I and two of my other cousins have always had the hard to manage hair. Pretty much everybody else in my family have had the hair that you wet it and it all curls up. You braid it and the braids stay put. I have always had the hair that nobody knew how to manage it. And so from the time I was about 5 years old, I was getting perms or chemicals placed on my hair to try to tame it. My grandmother would always warn me that if I didn't do something to my hair, I was at risk of having spiders lay eggs in my hair, especially when I started wearing braids and she thought I kept the braids in too long, or when I started my lock journey. One of her favorite products to get for me to put on my hair was VO5, as if somehow VO5 was going to help straighten out my roots. But my grandmother always had the most amazing hair. And ironically enough, her hair was natural. She never put chemicals on her hair, perms, hair dye. She didn't believe in it. But when it came to me, it was always a challenge to manage my hair. The picture below is a picture of me and my sister. My sister always had very fine hair and curly hair. So her hair was always the easy to manage hair. My hair was the difficult to manage hair. And the two pictures, the one of me on my birthday and the one of me below, typically when it came time for me to get my hair done, it was always a picture of me crying, because me and getting my hair combed and washed was always a challenging and difficult situation. The picture at the bottom there is a picture of me with my niece, and the sister who I'm in the picture with, that's her daughter. I have told her daughter since her daughter was a little bitty baby that she has the most amazing hair, because she does. She has hair that is a very similar texture to mine. I would argue that hers is an even better texture than mine, because she could do anything to her hair. And somehow, somewhere along the way, she got the message that her hair is terrible. And so she spends hundreds of dollars. She will let her car get repossessed, her gas and electric get cut off before she goes without getting her hair done, because she has always struggled with having the thicker hair. And she has a similar situation with having a sibling whose hair curls up with a little bit of water and hers not. And ironically enough, in that picture was the year that I decided to go on a natural hair journey. And if you look real close, you will see there's a big old scar on my forehead where I got burned with the curling iron. So I'm sure some of you have stories of getting burned with curling irons or hot combs because of all of the things that we do as we try to manage our natural hair. And so has began this journey of me with my natural hair, and the journey of trying to explain as a social worker and in social work settings what it means to be a Black woman and professionally managing our own story as it relates to our hair. So this is a picture of me this past Black History Month. Last month, I had an exhibit of one of the quilts that I made, which is the quilt that is She Who Wears the Crown. That's the quilt, and that's me at the exhibit. It was exhibited in Dorchester. And so I've been using fiber art and quilting as my medium to tell the story or the narrative of Black women and our hair journeys. So understanding trauma caused by hair, because it really is a trauma. And one of the things that I encourage those of you who are in the helping professions, those of you who work with children and families, you work with women, have conversations about hair. Ask people about their hair journey. Tell Black women that their hair is beautiful. Just say, wow, your hair is beautiful today. And you would be amazed at the stories or the triggers that come up for people as it relates to their hair. You can just a compliment on hair will start a long story from someone about their hair experience, because there is an emotional attachment that we have to our hair and our experience, good, bad, and other. Trauma, as we all know, is an emotional response to what some might describe as a terrible event. I personally have many stories of terrible events as it relates to my hair. I have stories of going to a hairdresser and her putting a chemical on my hair and literally chunks of hair coming out as a result of that experience. I already told you about the numerous burn marks that I have had as a result of it. Guys who didn't want to date me because they prefer to have girls that have this kind of hair or that kind of hair. And all the way to what the conversation as it relates to professionalism, being denied opportunities because I did not fit the model of what it means to be professional, which in our case tends to be a European standard of beauty. The impact of trauma can be subtle, it can be insidious, and in some cases it can be outright destructive. And again, if you have these conversations, primarily with African American women, about their hair experiences, you will see these ranges of what the impact has been on them. Most of us have heard the expression that Black women are tired, and we are tired for a lot of reasons, that it can be exhausting being a Black woman. And I would argue that for a lot of us, trying to maintain, what is the standard of beauty can be an exhausting process. Many of us spend lots of money on our hair. We sleep in certain positions trying to manage our hair so that it doesn't get messed up. If you have a job interview the next day, you go through great lengths to get prepared. And a lot of times it centers around what? Our hair. If you ever try to take a vacation as a Black woman, trying to figure out what to do with your hair, depending on the location of said vacation, if it's raining outside and how you're going to get from the car to the building without messing up your hair. All of these things are factors that we have to take into consideration that sometimes other people don't have to take into consideration. So there can be various types of responses, hypersensitivity about it. And I would argue that, and if you just even look in social media, you go through some of the TikTok videos, some of the social media of some of our celebrities, you can see what the response is to the stress as it relates to our hair has been. And it's one of those things that we don't often talk about because it has been a norm. So the problem is that Black women are, and the literature shows this, denied opportunities for employment and professional advancement because of hair. And I know it sounds so ridiculous when I have this conversation. People think that it sounds ridiculous. They can't believe it. What are you talking about? But if you look at, again, our news, very few of our Black women who are newscasters are afforded the opportunity to wear their natural hair. If they have natural hair, they end up having to wear a wig on top of their natural hair because it's just not accepted on television in many areas. So they have to wear braids or wigs or something else to cover up their natural hair. And that is true in many professional environments. When I was teaching in an MSW program, and when I was an MSW student, the messages that we got as it relates to how to prepare yourself for professional environments was often geared around European standards of beauty. and what you needed to do in order to get prepared often did not match up with what it was, what we could do with our hair did not always match up with the examples that were given to us as a result. So if you do a Google search, and again, I want to encourage all of you, don't take my word for it, do a Google search for unprofessional hair. These are some of the images in 2016. And still to this day, if you do a Google search, these are some of the images that come up under the category of unprofessional hair. And the same, do the search for professional hair, and you will see the opposite images come up. Blonde hair, European standards of beauty once again come up as the image. So do the Google search. So what are the messages then that we receive when we see these kinds of these kind of messages of what is professional and what is unprofessional? And what does this do to us as women? What does it do to us as Black women? What does it do to a young woman like my niece, who has been told time and time again how beautiful she is, if the messages that she gets is that her hair is unprofessional? So Black women are 1.5 times more likely to be sent home from school, to be sent home from their workplace, to be sent home from a professional environment because of their hair. And when I first started teaching at Coppin, I had a student in one of my classes who was actually sent home from her internship. And this was in 2016. She was sent home from her internship because she showed up at the internship with her natural afro. She had started the internship wearing a weave, and then one day she decided to come with her afro, and the internship supervisor decided to send her home, and thus started the conversation with myself and some of my colleagues about what messages are we giving students? What messages are we giving our colleagues in the field? And if you look at the picture, this is the picture of a mini quilt that I created of a woman with the afro, and again, with the crown as the centerpiece, and the hair that says Black Lives Matter in that piece. And this was gifted as a part of a swap to a young lady. So conforming, part of the messages that we get and that we give is that we must conform. And again, what the evidence shows is that Black women are more likely to agree that they have had to change their hair from its natural state to fit in at the office, in school, or in social environments. So again, that rather than embracing what is naturally growing out of our head, we have to conform so that we can fit in. If you want to get the promotion, you are going to have to start conforming. And these are the messages as professionals, as social workers, as social work educators, as teachers, that we as parents, that we start to give our young ladies, is that if you want to get the job, if you want to fit in, if you want to get the date, if you want to be popular, then you have to conform instead of embracing what grows naturally out of your head. And thus meaning what you have isn't good enough. And so the Crown Act. The Crown Act stands for Creating Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. Not saying that you should not have options. And if you want to wear a weave or some braids or faux locks, or rock your hair however you want to rock your hair, that you should also be accepted for wearing your hair the way that it grows out of your head, and that having natural hair should not be so stressful. The first time I decided to go ahead and have my natural hair, I first started with just pressing my hair. And I had a hairdresser who she could press my hair, and she was pressing it. And then she decided that she was getting married. She married a guy who was about 15 years her senior. He was retired. And so they started taking longer and longer vacations. So instead of the shop being closed on Sundays and Mondays, which traditionally most shops are closed on Sundays and Mondays, it would be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Friday. So she would have these longer and longer days. And I remember once I went to a spa, and I had a hair appointment, so I scheduled my spa day around this hair appointment day. And this is before we had cell phones where you could just call and have everything all set up. We had pagers back in those days. I don't know if anybody remembers pagers besides me, a beeper. And so I set up this appointment, and I'm headed back to town and I'm racing back to town because the spa was probably like 2 hours away from where my hairdresser was. So I'm racing back to town to get to my hair appointment, and she's paging me, which means I have to get off the highway to get to a cell phone. And she had left a message for me that she decided to close the shop early because her and her husband were going fishing. And I'm coming back from the spa with this big old poof on my head. I did not know what to do with it. I remember crying. And I had to get one of my friends. We had to go shopping all over town to try to find a hot comb so that we could straighten my hair. And then that was the day that I decided that I was going to lock my hair, that I was never going to have another day of riding around trying to find a hot comb so that I could straighten out my hair. And so really trying to create a space where we don't have to have people grown women. I was a grown woman fully in my 30s by that time, stressed out about the natural state of our hair. Fortunately, we all have YouTube now, and there's other things that you could do. But at that time, there really were not very many other things that you could do. So these are 2 mini quilts that I created. And throughout this presentation, there were pictures and images of quilts that I created. And what I love about using quilts and art and fiber arts is, one, trying to find fabrics that have these images. So this piece with the orange is actually some fabric that have these beautiful Afro women in the fabric, and I do what we call fussy cutting around to create the quilt. This is also for a swap that I did, and swaps are these things that we do online. You never know who you're going to get as your swap partner. You get randomly mixed with people, so you make your piece first, and then you find out later who you're creating it and mailing it for. So you just make it and then you get a partner to send it to. So this particular piece I created the hair tie to put on this piece, and then I mailed it to a woman who happened to be a white woman in the Midwest. And I got the most beautiful message from her daughter, who just sent me a message, an inbox message, and she hung it up in her sewing room. But the daughter sent me a really beautiful message just saying how awesome the piece was. And it opened up a dialogue between myself and the mom and the daughter. And then this second piece, I really struggle with what kind of hair to give the lady. And so even in my quilt pieces, hair becomes a big conversation in a lot of my social media posts about what to do about their hair. In this particular piece, I went with the braids. And again, it was for a swap. This piece actually ended up in a swap to a lady in Canada who is a white mom with biracial children. And again, her dialogue with me was about representation and having something that she could have a conversation with her daughters about, and how representation matters. So being able to use this format to have these conversations with ladies all across the country and in other parts of the world to really talk about something that is important to me, and to talk about something that has also been a source of pain for me in my life. It's been also a healing practice for me. And also because representation matters. This is the reason it matters. I started this conversation by telling you that I'm a professor at the best social work program, I would say, in the country, not just the city of Baltimore, but in the country, at Coppin State University. These are some of the students that I have had the pleasure and benefit of teaching over the years, and to get them to embrace, who they are on the outside when they see themselves as I embrace who I am, so that they know that they have everything that they need to go out into the world and to start helping people in the community embrace who they are. And not just for the students, but also for my colleagues. Because like I said, there are so many times that we have these conversations about what do we tell students about professionalism, because it is a big part of preparing social workers. And so this is the reason, because representation matters. And so this is a part of my journey. And so she who wears the crown, I just want you to remember that when you see a Black woman and you know that most of the time her hair is intentional, that it, for many of us, it has been a struggle. So if she's looking good and she's looking cute, make sure you let her know. And she is always looking good and she is always looking cute. So there is no day not to let her know that she's looking good and she's looking cute. And so that's my story. I don't know what my time is right now. Let me see. Yep, I got some minutes left. I wanted to open it up to see if any people had any questions or thoughts or comments. I see there's a couple of comments in the chats. Okay, yep.
Dr.
Yay.
Gillian, thank you so much for your presentation. We're joining you from our policy course,
Hey,
and
the policy course.
and so I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more about the Crown Act as a policy, and just how monumental it is for us as Black people, as Black
Yes,
women, because like you
yes,
said, we all have our hair stories. Uh,
yes.
Talk about how and why this is so monumental.
Yes. So it really is very important. So in 2019 is when the legislation, it's been talked about and discussed and introduced several times in many ways. And if you actually look, just Google it. I promise you, you can see there's so many instances where people, and particularly it affects Black women, it affects other people, but in particular, it affects Black women, where Black women have been fired from their jobs. And we are not just talking about social workers. I'm talking about jobs as working in hotel workers, restaurant workers, office workers, jobs where, you're a social worker, you have a degree, you have choices, you have options. I have options. I have my PhD. I know I can go get another job. But if you are someone who you're working in an industry where you are struggling to get by, it may not be as easy for the next job to come by. But people face discrimination and they have been fired and they have taken cases to court and have lost the cases over and over again because the law has said consistently that employers can set their standards for who they want to work with them and what is professional. So the legislation is important because it basically states that you cannot be discriminated against for wearing your hair in its natural state. And it's not true in every state. It is true in Maryland. Maryland has adopted the legislation. California was the first state, my home state of California, the country of California, the best state, right, did adopt the legislation, but it's not true in every state. And so there still are many states. And it is important and it is monumental because, again, it is a form of discrimination. If you are someone who is a low wage worker, and when I teach policy and I talk about policy, and when you look at low wage workers, primarily it's women. African-American women in general make 64 cents to every $1 that their white male counterparts make. And so we already are making the least amount of money. And so then we have to spend the most amount of money on our grooming so that we can be considered professional. You're already having to put out all of this money. It makes a difference. If you have to spend a significant amount of your income so that your hair can be professional, the time that it takes, the energy, not to mention the emotional trauma, which is what I really want people to be thinking about. And I want social workers to be thinking about, because even as a social worker, and I practice child welfare, and I think about all of the times that we do an assessment of children and we do an assessment of families. And one of the first things that we will say is, we'll talk about grooming. And is the hair kempt or unkempt? I don't know if you all still use that language now out in child welfare, but what, is this kempt or unkempt? What are we talking about? Is Dr. Buckley kempt today or not unkempt? Meaning, does your hair look a certain way or it doesn't look a certain way? What does that mean? When I first started growing locks, I remember going into HR in my agency, and I had my master's degree by then, so y'all couldn't tell me nothing. I was number one on the test. I was number one on the probation test, so I knew I was going to have a job. But I remember my manager in HR telling me, you are not going to get a job with your hair looking like that. So they literally, you can be number one on the test, and they can look at you and say, you're not going to get a job if you wear your hair like that. Literally rule you out just based on the fact of your hair is in a certain style. And we do that to each other. My HR manager was a Black woman. So it's not a matter of, Black versus white. It is a matter of policies that are put in place that discriminate against Black women. And the only thing that you did was wake up today and comb your hair. Which is your prerogative, or you wore your hair in the state that it is in. So the legislation is instrumental. It's too bad that we have to have that legislation, but it is instrumental. There are law schools at HBCUs that will put men out of the law school because they have their hair in locks. There are high schools that will not let students graduate from high school because they have their hair in locks. They're not, the locks are not doing anything but being locked. They're not wearing it standing up on top of their head. The hair is not feathers. It's literally the hair growing out their head, but we don't want to have locks. There are, what trauma are you doing to a child in the middle of a wrestling match when they have to shave their head because you don't want them to have locks at the wrestling match? And those are real stories that have happened. So the legislation is very important to protect people's rights, their emotional health and well-being, and also to stop a form of discrimination that absolutely affects Black women and others who are just growing their hair out of their head. If you think about the last time you've traveled, anybody travel lately? It affects you in so many subtle ways. You pay for a hotel room, you pay for all of those little amenities, those little bitty teeny bottles of shampoo that if you have hair like mine, you can't even use the shampoo. I would like my money back for all the shampoo that I cannot use because I still have to go and buy my own shampoo. I really do want a refund. Don't charge me for the stuff that I cannot use. But for the first time, a couple of weekends ago, me and my husband went away and they actually had shampoo that I could use, a big giant bottle of the shampoo. I'm like, why don't all the hotels do this, right? When you go to stores, we all take for granted because we're here on the East Coast, but there's many places in California, the hair care section for Black women, it's about, for Black people in general, or people with natural hair, it's about this big. Like you have to search high and low for hair care products. So there's so many things that we take for granted, that others have access to. And it is about access, it's about equity, it is about fairness. And so those are some of the things that the legislation brings awareness to. And there's a huge campaign online. You can follow the hashtag Black Hair Experience. There's an amazing exhibit here in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area about the Black hair care experience that really explains in detail what this issue is really about. But I know that my hair trauma, and it really is hair trauma, it goes way back and it goes way deep. And so I know if I'm experiencing it, that other people are probably haven't had the same experience. And so I want social workers to be aware. Anybody else have any comments, thoughts, questions? I see some stuff in the chat.
I also wanted to just appreciate you for mentioning the fact that even amongst ourselves, we can and have been discriminatory. I
Yes.
still have very strong feelings about Monique from a few months ago when she called herself, going hard on Black women and, for the way that they present themselves while they're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly speaks to the way that their hair is presented. I mean, I can imagine, like you said, sometimes you get your hair done, you got to sleep a certain way because you're trying to maintain,
Mm-hmm.
And so for her as a Black woman to use her platform in that way, I just found it to be so unfortunate and quite frankly a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I say all the time, even as for us as Black people, like we are all colonized. And this is when we talk about anti-racist social work, for those of us who are social workers, that all of us are colonized and socialized in the way of the colonizer. So I say every day I wake up fighting my colonized mind. Every day it is a battle with this colonized mind, because these standards, and it is the European standards of beauty, the European standard way of being, all of us are dealing with that. All of us are dealing with, what is good, what is right, what is evil, what is bad, and it's in all of us. And so it's up to all of us to be checking ourselves, and to be mindful and aware. And so even when Monique comments about people wearing a bonnet, yeah, you might not like seeing people with a bonnet because that's something that's ingrained in us, but all of us can relate to, and how much you had to pay to get your hair done and how you needed to stay in place until you get to the destination of where you're trying to go. I don't care what I look like, until I get to where I'm trying to go. How many of us have went swimming and, heaven forbid, your hair get wet? I remember on my honeymoon, I wanted to be in that water so bad. And I was in the water because I am a beach girl, but I promise you, no water touched my hair on that whole entire honeymoon. Not a drop of water touched my hair on that honeymoon. Absolutely not, because I had to take pictures, right? That's what we do. I had a cute bathing suit. I was cute. I was getting tan, but I was not letting that water touch my hair. And it poured down rain one of the days. My poor husband, absolutely not. That water was not touching my hair, right? Those are the things that we do. And we're going to wrap a bag around my head, cellophane, aluminum foil, whatever we have to do so that the hair don't get wet, right? Because it's a process.
Can I jump in?
Sitting up, right? I'm not the only one that's sitting up.
Listen, that's me right now with my locks. I have a big old cap. I have a cone head for real.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know what? And I'm chiming in. I'm laughing, but I'm also off camera because I'm not having a good hair day myself. So I'm off camera, and I absolutely will not come on camera right now. But that was so funny, and so on point what you said. The whole presentation is amazing, Dr. Gilliam. I appreciate it. But I thought even about our children, because I thought about the times that my daughter, I spent an entire day doing her hair, and I do mean a full 8-hour day doing her hair, and then for her to go outside and play water guns with her brother, or to roll around on the floor to get it back all fuzzy when I spent a whole entire day doing it, especially if there's somewhere to go, because you mentioned about being unkempt, because especially in our community, not even outside the community, but, your children, particularly your female, our daughters get judged based on how their hair looks. If it's not unkempt, if it's not laid down a certain kind of way, if it's not as fresh as it could be, there are judgments that our own community, particularly other mothers, will make about children and their hair. So
fighting that colonized mind. Absolutely.
Exactly.
That, there's an awareness. When I first went to work.
You have some stuff
I'm sorry.
in the
Is
chat.
there some stuff in the chat? Okay. And when I was working in the child welfare agency, we all know this, I was patting my head. I'm the only Black woman working on my team. And my supervisor, she really thought something was wrong. And so she brought me in for a meeting. Is everything okay? I see you patting yourself in the head. She thought I had a twitch or something. And how embarrassing it was to explain to her, this is the pat that you do before you go get a perm. I can't be scratching before I locked my hair. And then no kidding, maybe about 2 weeks ago, me and my husband were driving down Howard and North Avenue, and there was a white gentleman on the side of the street, walking up and down the street panhandling, and he was patting himself on the head. And my husband said, he's over there doing the Black girl head pat. It's universal, right? We all recognize that.
Yep, I remember that. Remember that patting because you can't scratch it before the perm.
Yes.
You made mention of the word unkempt, and I was sharing in our class before we came over to your session here that, and I think I had told you about this when I went to the Baltimore Museum of Art a couple of months ago. One of the exhibits, I think it was Stephen from Scripture that was featured in this particular exhibit, and they referred to his hair as unkempt. And I'm like, wow, look at how this coded language is even reinforced in art.
Yes. Yep. So I see. So thank you for sharing from Trina. I had to come to a place within myself where I was confident to wear my natural hair. And that really is what it's about, Trina. And what I try to do with my artwork is really instilling even to call myself an artist takes some confidence building, right? But instill that confidence that people can see themselves in the work and to be able to have the conversation and in professional spaces and to be able to own it. And to be able to own your professional identity. And again, for us as Black women to own our own narrative and to be able to change the language. And hair and natural hair is actually really a journey, right? Taishea said it was unfortunate that Black people are discriminated against. It, yep, it's definitely unfortunate due to natural characteristics. And it's not just hair, Taishea. There's so many features and characteristics where we're talking about colorism, when we're talking about body shape, body size, right? There's so many ways in which Black people can get discriminated against. And again, in particular, Black women. And how that shapes our self-esteem and our confidence. And then when we start having behaviors, right? And I talked about it when I was talking about our trauma response is really what it is, how we choose to cope, because now we have what some people want to say is a bad attitude, or, you know, I have some kind of reaction of, I don't want people to touch my hair, or I change my hair every week. And so now you're experiencing microaggressions because people start making comments of, I don't recognize you because you change your hair every week. Well, that could be my response to, I own my hair. And so, you know, this is the way that I choose to deal with having to be able to cope in this workplace. Trina, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that your artwork is really inspiring. And I hope that some young women are able to, you know, really take a good look at it so that they know that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to, you know, be different than what society says that you should be.
Yes. Thank you, Trina. And one of the things that I have started doing is you don't have to sew in order to do art. I have done some book club groups and birthday parties upon request where we're not sewing, where we are doing fiber art portraits using glue and the fabric and patterns, and then people can make their own art and have these same discussions. This is a postcard that I did, but you're absolutely right. People would be surprised before Black Lives Matter, and sewing spaces are also very much segregated, and there's a lot of discrimination that happens even in the sewing spaces. There's a group called Social Justice Sewing Academy. If you can look them up, SOCIAL, Social Justice Sewing Academy. They put out a lot of patterns that you can do for drawing, coloring. They also do like memorial quilts. So when people pass away, where they do quilts to memorialize people who are murdered. One of the things when they first started doing their quilting, there was a lot of backlash, and then all of a sudden Black Lives Matter happened. And one of the things that they brought awareness to, people would be surprised how hard it is to find fabrics and supplies in skin tone colors. And so that was one of the things that was a challenge. And so it has opened up a whole conversation and a whole dialogue, and really even getting our counterparts to see some of the challenges and the issues. But you'd be surprised all of the racism and segregation that happens in sewing spaces, and definitely in quilting spaces. The other thing that this medium has done for me is it has allowed me to practice intentional and unapologetic self-care. And that is another thing that I am very clear about, is that in order to manage trauma, in order to manage your own self-healing, is you really do have to find a self-care outlet. And for me, the sewing and the quilting and finding a meaning in all of this has come through fiber arts and reaching out to some of the other quilters who do amazing quilt work and who have been doing this for a really long time, and being intentional about it and creating the space and the opportunities. I think somebody mentioned it in here. I think it was Taishaya, about safe spaces, about creating safe spaces for people to be able to talk about what their experiences are. We have some funny stories where we really laugh about some of the most ridiculous things that we have experienced about our hair. And then we have some really sad stories about some of the really ridiculous things that we have done as a result of our hair. Like, you'd be ridiculous of some of the things that people share that they will do in order to date somebody, you know, based on hair. You know, I dyed my hair blonde once at someone's request. How ridiculous. I'm like the most ridiculous looking blonde you ever want to see, by the way. Somebody said, as a father of a 9-year-old daughter, it's always tough. Yes. When they see, absolutely. When we have two girls, my niece, and then also my bonus daughter, who is 19, who really struggles with seeing other girls and thinking that, you know, their hair is pretty and her hair is not. And, you know, how do you manage that? It really is a challenge, Mark. And especially for us as social workers, to start bringing awareness to these issues so that we are validating all of our young girls, all of our women. And again, I think it's so important when you see another woman, when you see a young lady, when you see a girl, compliment her, comment on her beauty, because there's so many other negative images and negative messages out there that do just the opposite. Again, I showed you the picture of, if you just Google what is unprofessional, you know, many of us can look at this picture of what is considered unprofessional. Like, Michelle Obama is unprofessional, really? Like, that's what y'all trying to say is unprofessional? You know, we can see ourselves in that. Are there any other last minute comments, questions? I got like 1 minute and I have to let you all go. I really do want you to look more into the Crown Act. And again, if for those of you in the policy class, to make sure you let your legislators know that we need this act, we want this act, we need it to be passed more broadly. That is important. That when we also make sure our social work colleagues know and understand that we are mindful about our biases towards other people or towards women and Black women as it relates to how we are defining what is professional, and that we get a broader standard of professional. I don't want to end on that picture. Thoughts, comments, concerns? Let's end on the best picture.
Dr. Gilliam, I just want to say I enjoyed your presentation. It's wonderful. I have been natural for 9 years.
Nice.
And my hair is a 4C. So it took a lot to get a ponytail in.
Yes, and you have amazing hair. You have amazing
Thank
hair.
you. It took about 4 hours to just get a ponytail.
See?
To get it pressed.
See? That hair has a life of its own. Thank you. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I hope you get to check out some of the other amazing presentations, and hopefully we will see you on Saturday at Coppin at the community day. And they will have, we'll have the braiders and the barbers there, right? Dr. Buckley, is that this year? Yes. So everything you ever wanted to know and see and hear about hair is at Coppin on Saturday. Come on out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.
You too. This might be overprint.